FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Financial Survival Network is brought to you today by Orin Resources, a junior exploration company with the appetite of a major. It's hot on the trail of the next globally significant discovery, creating enormous potential upside for you, the shareholder. Orin is one of the most aggressive exploration companies pursuing high-grade, scalable gold and copper deposits and has a premier 7-project portfolio, including its 2 flagships, Committee Bay in the Arctic and Sombrero in Peru. Orin's unparalleled technical team and highly experienced management has a history of success in advancing and monetizing exploration assets. No wonder Orin's been called one of the best in the junior exploration sector. Orin trades on the TSX and the NYSE under AUG. To learn more, go to orinresources.com. That's AURYN resources.com.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. It's 5/21/19. Well, I'm reminded of that old Marvin Gaye song, What's Going On? One of my favorites back from high school. I mean, Marvin Gaye, he was amazing. Not to get into the backstory of his untimely demise, but sometimes family can turn into your worst enemy for sure. Certainly your government is always has the potential to be your worst enemy. Well, as always, just write us with anything, kl@kerrylutz.com. So what's going on here with the economy? What's going on with international geopolitical scene? All these things. Our good friend Rob Kirby is back with us. You'll find him at kirbyanalytics.com. Rob, welcome back. So it seems like everything's fine. Trump is president. We've got an economy that's better than it ever has been before. Where are we wrong here?
Oh, come on, Kerry. The dollar's strong. The U.S. debt market is the deepest with the biggest breadth in the world. And the equity market, even if it coughs out a lung every now and then, all's well there. And don't worry about trade deals. Trade deals don't really matter. And the military options in the Middle East, well, they don't seem to matter either. So all seems good in dollar land, unless you look couple pages beneath the cover.
Right.
And then things maybe aren't quite as good as they were purported to be.
Mm-hmm. And so what are the dark clouds? What are the dark, the silver linings dark cloud, if you will?
Well, if you want to take a look at Saudi Aramco's latest prospectus dated April 1 of this year, and this is a prospectus they issued regarding a bond issue that they were hoping to do. And if you go to you got to understand, too, that this prospectus is hundreds of pages in density. And if you go to notes to the financial statements,
that's where the truth is always hidden, right? It's always in the notes.
Yeah, on page F224, you will see that Saudi Aramco shows in the receivables Chinese currency, Japanese currency, and euros. So much for Saudi Aramco only selling their oil for dollars. So, I mean, it's not exactly the world as it's been explained to us. And why this hasn't been talked about in the mainstream press, I can only guess. But I mean, to me, this is a rip in the fabric of the underpinnings of the U.S. dollar. Mm-hmm. Because the U.S. dollar has another name. It's called the petrodollar. Mm. And the petrodollar is backed by the sanctity that Saudi Arabia only sells their crude oil for dollars. Well, the reality is they've been selling their oil for other than crude. So they've been selling their crude for other than U.S. dollars now for at least 2 years. So how much oil they've sold for non-dollars this year, I can't tell you. But I can tell you they were doing so in 2017 and 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's sort of a slap in the face. And slap in the face to people who who promote the primacy of the US dollar and that it could never happen here.
Yeah.
Because it's happening. And of course, we will be the last people to know unless you want to get your hands dirty and go dig it up.
Mm-hmm. What other indications do we have besides Saudis selling oil for non-dollars, if you will?
Well, how about China buying oil for Chinese currency from Venezuela? How about Iran selling their oil for other than dollars? I mean, it seems to me that oil is being sold for other than dollars and has been for a very long time. I mean, after all, Kerry, we know that Iraq was invaded, unless you've got your head buried in the sand. Iraq was invaded because Saddam Hussein was selling his oil, Iraqi oil, for euros. And I mean, that was going on back at the turn of the century. So let's just say the underpinnings of the dollar have been compromised and have been very likely for a lot longer than anyone wants to admit. And this is something that nobody on Wall Street will dare talk about, and nobody in Washington will dare talk about, because when you start talking about things like that, or if you start talking about the activities of the Exchange Stabilization Fund, or if you start talking about, unless your name is AOC, the occasional cortex crazy from New York,
yeah,
who lightheartedly made some crazy statements about the missing 21 trillion identified by Dr. Mark Skidmore and his research team at Michigan State University, along with the work of Catherine Fitz and her intimate knowledge of the agency HUD, Housing and Urban Development. They've done amazing work exposing the fact that $21 trillion at bare minimum was put through the books of DOD and HUD, the bulk of it being DOD. Mm-hmm. And when this was revealed, the revealings were posted on Catherine Fitz's website, solari.com. And in their write-up on this malfeasance, they had active links going back to DOD and HUD, showing the raw data where they got this work, and their coverage or their research covered a period of time from 1998 to 2015, where said 21 trillion basically disappeared into the ether without an explanation. And when this was presented, the first course of action was that the DOD killed all the links, so that when people clicked on the links to try and go to the raw data, it looked like the raw data didn't exist anymore. So I mean, if this was a nothing burger, why did they kill the links to the raw data? So, and a week after this incident was made widely known, when Dr. Mark Skidmore did an interview with Greg Hunter back, it was around Christmas time, more than a year ago. So this would be Christmas of 2017. The White House very quickly ordered a full audit of the Department of Defense. First time in the history of DOD that an audit had been ordered. And the DOD was failing the audit. So the good regulatory folks at FASB had the regulatory framework redone so that the federal government, with their budget, were excused from accounting and could basically issue financial reporting that would be like the thickness of a phone book, all redacted and blacked out. Because if it's in the interest of national security, the federal government is now excused from reporting true and accurate financials.
Mm-hmm.
So the United States government, where I sit, the United States government now is no longer subject to accounting. Because if anyone uncovers anything that they don't want in the public, namely the missing $21 trillion, and which I must say Catherine Fitz believes privately that the amount is very likely much greater than that. And this money I refer to as dark money. Right. And these are the dark funds that are siloed in black places like the Exchange Stabilization Fund, which is an adjunct to the U.S. Treasury, created in 1934, and its mission statement is to enable and foster the perpetuation or primacy of the U.S. dollar in world trade settlement. And that's exactly what the ESF has been doing for a very, very long time. And this is why, Kerry, when countries like China or Russia or Saudi Arabia or Japan, when they dump their U.S. government securities in the open market, yields never go up. The bonds that people are liquidating get consumed extremely quickly. And usually as a result of these U.S. government securities being liquidated, the bond market rallies. Mm-hmm. Isn't it amazing when your biggest creditor dumps your currency and your fixed income securities that the market actually improves?
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah, and the reason this happens is because these globalist dirtbags who have performed a silent financial coup in America, they have at their disposal trillions upon trillions of these dark dollars, which were created out of thin air, which they have at their disposal and can marshal up whenever they are needed. And it's amazing that this goes on and on and on. And people point to it, this unmitigated criminal fraud, this hoax. And people point to it and they exclaim that this shows how deep the U.S. government bond market is and how strong the dollar is. Because when the biggest holder of U.S. government securities in the world can absolutely flush their holdings down the toilet, they get bought up by we don't know who, because nobody ever explains who's doing the buying. Mm-hmm. But it's the investigative work of Fitz and Skidmore that tell us these people have dollars. You see, the reality, Kerry, nobody knows how many U.S. dollars are in existence.
Correct.
We all operate under the assumption, most of us do anyway, that the monetary aggregate data, as compiled by the U.S. St. Louis Federal Reserve, which is where the U.S. monetary aggregate data is kept, we all assume that that's accurate. But let me tell you, the St. Louis Fed's monetary aggregate data does not include the 21 trillion identified by Fitz and Skidmore. And what this $21 trillion of extra money is very consistent with is the work of another brilliant economist. His name is Chris Martenson.
Oh, sure. I know Chris well.
Chris Martenson produced a wonderful piece of work back in early 2009. It's called The Crash Course. And in this video expose called The Crash Course, and if you Google Chris Martenson and Crash Course, you will easily find the links to it. And if you watch it, it explains the life cycle of any fiat currency with compound interest. It explains and shows graphically its life cycle. And it shows how the supply of money in such a system grows upward to the right at a very, very, very shallow slope until it reaches an inflection point. And after it inflects, the growth in money must go vertical. And what Chris Martenson is showing is that basically he's showing the life cycle of the US dollar. And you see, the modeling that Chris Martenson has done is no different than the modeling the Federal Reserve would have done in the 90s and the early 00s. And the Federal Reserve and the people at the U.S. Treasury knew exactly what they were going to be confronting years down the road, because what Martinson knows, they know too. And what has happened, basically at around the time of the financial crisis, in the life cycle of the dollar, the curve inflected and went vertical.
Yes.
And I remember back in the time period, myself writing and saying to people, the only way this experiment with fiat money can end is in a hyperinflation. And I remember pundits saying to me, Kirby, you're saying that we're going to have a hyperinflation. Where is the money going to come from for the hyperinflation? Well, now, thanks to the work of Skidmore and Fitz, we know exactly where the money has come from. It already exists. It has been being created now for at least 20 years, since 1998 onward. And what the revelations of this 21 trillion in dark money shows, and the time period over which it was created, absolutely reinforces and validates the work of Martinson. And it shows that they've been creating the money all along because they knew they couldn't probably create it all at once because it would be too noticeable.
It's like a rainy day fund, right?
Yeah. So they've been creating a slush fund, and this slush fund has been being put to work. Because how many times have you heard? I mean, I've asked the question hundreds of times over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. When there have been these big liquidations of U.S. government bonds that have been very publicly announced by the likes of Russia and China, I think even Japan, maybe Saudi Arabia at one point in time, when they've done serious liquidations of U.S. government securities. And not only does the bond market not back up, it rallies in the face of those.
Many times.
And the questions have been persistent by people who do any kind of honest reporting. They've been asking the question, who is buying the bonds when these liquidations occur? Well, I think it's very clear who's doing the buying, because we know who has the money. And the money this has been a deep, dark secret for a very long time, except it's not so secret anymore. And you see, foreigners are aware of this now, very aware of this, Kerry. And this is why it's become so difficult to tap out a trade deal, because America has not been playing. And when I say this, I'm not talking about rank and file Americans. Americans are living in an occupied country. Your own country, unfortunately, has been occupied by globalists. And I shouldn't be throwing stones when I live in a glass house, because Canada is ruled by globalists as well.
The world appears to be, right? Most of it.
Exactly. But the reality, Kerry, is that we've been lied to on a scale that is unbelievable. And this is ultimately what's at the root of all geopolitical tension in the world. At least that's the way I would have it. If anybody wants to get unplugged from their iPhone for 10 minutes or long enough to look at the facts that are in front of us and pay attention to what's really going on.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I've never trusted any numbers that the government publishes. The only one I do semi-trust, because to my knowledge they haven't cooked it yet, is the monthly new claims for unemployment insurance. That one appears to be real. But as far as the unemployment rate, who could believe it? All of these numbers that come out of the government, GDP, everything else, they're so attenuated, they're so watered down, and they're not using really sound statistical methods to compile these numbers, that they've lost credibility to me long ago.
Yeah. Well, anybody who even remotely follows the work of John Williams of shadowstats.com, it would be very, very well aware of the shortcomings in official government data as it relates to the unemployment rate, GDP, and inflation.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's an open secret, open, dirty secret. So what's our solution here? Do we just have to wait for the whole thing to collapse and then try to pick up the pieces?
Well, the reality is, Kerry, if nothing is done, it will collapse. And it's not a question of whether it collapses. It's more a question of when. And, it's very interesting. I had this discussion with an associate this morning who said to me, the really, really big question is, when is it going to happen?
It's always been the question.
Well, and my response to him was, if you can imagine yourself doing a drug deal back in the 1980s with Pablo Escobar, where you screw him on a drug deal, is the really relevant question when he's going to kill you?
Yeah, he's going to kill you. There's no question about that.
So that to me is the more relevant question. Basically, I mean, because the answer is you're dead already.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter, because it'll be at a time of his choosing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, under such a scenario,
and
I look at, for instance, the revelations that Saudis have been selling oil for other than dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, the revelations that this is indeed a fact is like somebody screwing Pablo Escobar on a drug deal in the 80s.
Yeah, well,
So my question becomes, it's not a question of whether Saudi support for the dollar is going to be removed. It's only a question of when. And best one prepare for a day when the petrodollar is no longer the petrodollar. It's just the American dollar, backed by nothing.
Yeah, which it's been backed by nothing for quite a while. Well, it's an interesting analysis of the situation, Rob, and a lot to think about. So personally, you can do more than as a citizen of the country, because you have no control over the political system. It's been out of control, off the rails for decades now. So I guess the key is buy gold, silver. What about Bitcoin? Do you believe that Bitcoin has any future in the future money system?
I believe crypto has a place in the monetary system of the future. But the thing, Kerry, I can't come to grips with is which crypto it's going to be that will be relevant in the future.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a hint, because I've thought about this a lot. Okay. All of the existing cryptos, with the exception of some new ones that have come out recently, all suffer a common security threat or deficiency. So by their nature, they cannot be the future currency, because if Bitcoin has no price discovery for 3 days, guess what? Bitcoin is finished. And that goes for any of them. So we need cryptocurrencies 2.0 or 3.0 that can replicate themselves and replicate their nodes seamlessly and undetectably, because all the nodes for all the current cryptocurrencies are known and can be gotten at one way or the other. We've never seen a massive attack on nodes, but we have seen individual attacks that have been effective in disabling individual nodes. And you know what? It's really quite simple to do. I mean, anybody with modest hacker skills, so NSA, whomever, or any large private actor or a sovereign actor has the ability to shut down all of the world's cryptocurrency markets for a period of time that will render them untrustworthy. Yeah.
Well, my view of it, Kerry, is that the dollar standard is dying because the fiat system was so susceptible to fraud and criminality, which has reared its head, because we now, as far as I'm concerned, we have a smoking gun that this indeed has been the case. And my best guess at the moment is that the powers that be, the people who control the global monetary levers, are allowing, because I look at price action in Bitcoin, they've allowed the price of Bitcoin over the last 3 or 4 or 5 months run from a low on Bitcoin of 3,000 back around December up to 8,000 where it is today. And the reason that has been allowed to happen while gold and silver have been shackled to the ground, is that I really believe the powers that be view the crypto alternative, or they view crypto as an alternative, because I believe they already have a serious ore in the water in most of the cryptos that are widely traded today. And the other thing that crypto has going for it from the standpoint of a Keynesian-minded central banker is that these cryptos are backed by nothing.
Yeah.
Which makes them...
We like that. That's great.
Yeah, and because they have an ore in the water and it's something they feel they can somewhat control, and the key point is backed by nothing.
Yes.
And they feel they have influence. I believe that they will probably try to use a crypto alternative as a stopgap measure, knowing that the fiat dollar standard is basically dead on arrival now.
I think you could be right. Anyway, we got to go now. So it's kirbyanalytics.com. Go there, check out the site. And, well, nobody knows exactly how the future is going to unfold, but we certainly have got a clear indication of how it's going to happen. And like Rob said, it's just a question of when. So you need to be ready. A question for Rob or myself, simply email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. I've been a little remiss. I was in Savannah, Georgia for the weekend and didn't really answer any emails at all. So I'm stacked up, but I will get to them. I promise. We are going to have a little webinar on how you utilize the new tax law through real estate investing to minimize your income. Works best for those of you with lots of passive income, as well as people who are self-employed. There's strategies that you can invoke to dramatically lower your taxes. Rob, it's always a pleasure. Oh, by the way, email us, like I said, kl@kerrylutz.com, Twitter feed @KerryLutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Rob, always a pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure, Kerry. Hope we do it again soon.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.